another civil war on a different country. How could that happen twice?
How does that happen? That's if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which is more than you'd think.
Yeah, way more. Weird that it happened twice, right? Hello and welcome to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sport culture in the UK and the USA. I'm Adam Jordan, your resident American.
And I'm Harry Collins, your resident Brit. Adam, who is our patron saint for episode 34?
Our patron saint is a legend in the sport of baseball. For episode number 34, you've actually got a jersey up there of a baseball great who I don't know if you would call him a legend, but I feel like you could make the borderline case. Sure. But it's not Bryce Harper in his Nationals days wearing number 34. It is Red Sox legend David Ortiz. Ortiz, a 3-time World Series champion with the Boston Red Sox. He is a member of the 500 Home Run Club, an icon of the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry. His number is retired by the Boston Red Sox and is just one of the greatest power hitters of all time, known for clutch hits, clutch home runs throughout his career. He's a designated hitter. He didn't really play the field much in his career. He's really purely known for hitting. And I think in our rivalry theme for today's episode, I think he's a perfect fit because, again, when you think of great rivalries in sports, near the top is definitely Red Sox-Yankees, and he is an absolute, again, to use that word, an icon of that rivalry.
So later on, you're going to ask me a question that I've prepped for, and I was reading an article by ESPN from the year 2000 that listed the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry as the 7th biggest rivalry in American sports. And that's the highest for professional team sports in America, which was really interesting because like well above any NFL. And I was like, I don't fully understand it, so I can't wait to get into the main body of the episode and talk about that. I do want to pick you up on one thing there. You said Bryce Harper isn't necessarily a legend yet. Do you think contemporary players can be legends before they retire? Do you think that's a threshold that you can pass before it becomes a retrospective thing?
I definitely think so. I mean, like right now as we're talking, Alexander Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby in hockey, for example, are players who are currently active in the NHL. I don't know what Alex Ovechkin's going to do after this season, but he's the all-time leading goal scorer in professional hockey history, and Sidney Crosby is going to finish his career in the top 5. I think he's number 7 right now in total points and has 3 Stanley Cup championships. Like, I think there are players that you can definitely say are like Tom Brady was no less a legend when he was at 6 Super Bowls versus 7.
Yeah.
I think you definitely can be a legend while you're still playing.
All right, good. Speaking of legends, and something that happened very recently, we try not to do things too. We try not to discuss things so topically, because we record these typically bi-weekly. But I think last weekend we saw our generation's 4-minute mile achieved in a feat that many former pros and commentators said would never happen, or certainly not in our lifetime, despite Nike technically getting it done in 2019 under very specific circumstances. Sabastian Sawe won the London Marathon, obliterating the 2-hour mark. Did this break ground in America? I don't really know how well marathons are reported on around the world. I know that Boston happened a couple of weeks ago, and that's a huge one. That's a really competitive one. But like shattering the 2-hour mark, surely that's worthy news in America as well.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely broke through in like sports news, and like didn't see where it picked up elsewhere. But yeah, no, that definitely broke through in America. That's a huge
amazing,
feat, and I
isn't it?
agree. I really loved your framing on it, that like it's this generation's sub 4 minute mile, and also pour one out for the Ethiopian runner
Yomif, yeah.
Yomif K. Yeah, I really don't want to butcher the pronunciation of the name,
Kejelcha?
and I haven't heard it out loud. Yeah, Kejelcha. But yeah, him finishing in second place while also breaking the record by 19 seconds.
On his debut competitive marathon as well. It's
Yeah, just
astonishing.
unbelievable.
Like,
Like, how is that
and
possible?
how unlucky that you turn up and make the second best marathon time of all time, and you just happen to do it 20 seconds after the best marathon record of all time. Sabastian Sawe said in an interview afterwards, he reckons he can go faster. He reckons 158 was on the table and he left something in the tank. I don't know how you have that sort of, I don't know how you have that sort of guts to say that after smashing a record that's looked impossible for decades. But that, I think there's no more worthy news to talk about than the reframing of what we think is possible in a sport that's literally as old as the Olympics.
Yeah.
So yeah, incredible.
It's it's also like one of those things where it's just like in your head. Like, I'm not a runner,
Sure.
but so like I have a really hard time fathoming like what a strong marathon looks like,
Yeah.
from just like, or what it feels like. But it is incredible to me whenever I watch videos of competitive distance runners, or if I watch one myself. The New York City Marathon was just recently, and I unfortunately didn't catch the like actual competitive runners in that portion of it. But what always gets me is they just look like they're almost sprinting
Yeah.
the entire way. And it's just one of those things that my brain just has such a hard time fathoming how it's done. So yeah, it's one of the most impressive things that a person can do.
And he makes it look so effortless. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, it like he's running in the last mile. He does the last mile faster than I could even imagine running a mile after doing 25 others. It's absolutely astonishing. I mean, really incredible. Quite amazing to have watched it. There was sort of a fever pitch in London. The centre of London just like swells. Hundreds of thousands of people turn out. I am obviously proud of it because it's like British, and I know that there's a prestige to the New York and the Boston Marathon, but there is a tiny little bit of excitement that it happened on English turf. I think when he goes faster, and I think it's a when he goes faster, it'll happen elsewhere. But I was really, we were really pumped that it happened in London. Also, and you kind of got to feel, no, I don't feel bad for Nike. I don't think there's any situation where you should feel bad for Nike. But they spent millions developing that shoe to go sub 2 hours, and then Sawe did it in Adidas for seemingly, no concerted effort to get him there. And Adidas have now they're paying $40,000 a year to have him drug tested twice as often as WADA require to prove that he did it cleanly.
What?
It's really cool. Like they mentioned that like a couple of weeks ago. So
That's
they're
crazy.
shelling out to make sure that everybody knows he did it in Adidas and he did it completely clean.
Wow.
Cool. That's wicked. I don't know enough about marathon running to know if there are rivalries between elite runners. They kind of seem all really chill and really nice to each other.
Yeah, they do.
But the main part of today's episode is about the fever pitch. Some people, in some instances, it's the absolute peak of the sports that we enjoy to watch. In some instances, it's like the worst, most stressful watching experience, and sometimes it leads to like dark days in sport. But Adam, today we're going to talk about the anatomy of rivalries, which I'm amazed we haven't got to already. And I want to start with a little quiz.
Okay, let's go. Love it.
This is for you. I've just got 5 questions, and we're going to talk more about different kinds of rivalries in a few minutes. But I am going to tell you the name of a derby, and if you want, one of the teams in the derby.
Ooh,
And I
okay.
want you to just tell me the other team that make up that specific derby.
Okay,
For
I'm here for
instance, number one, can you tell me one or two of the teams in the North London derby?
That is Arsenal Tottenham.
Beautiful. Can
Though
you
it might
tell
be
me
one side.
or-
Might just be Arsenal soon. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we need to substitute a different team into North London in a bit. Can you tell me one or two of the teams in the Merseyside derby?
That's Liverpool Everton.
Very good. Can you tell me one or two of the teams? A reminder, you can ask for one of them. I won't give you both. One or two of the teams in the Second City derby.
The second city. Can I ask for a different hint? Is this
Yeah,
England?
yeah, of course. It is English, yes.
Okay.
All of these are in England.
Okay. Is one
Good
of
question, though.
is one of the teams Birmingham?
Yes.
Okay.
If one of the teams is Birmingham, can you guess the other one?
You got me. I don't know the other team in Birmingham.
The other one, there are. It's tough. I think if you asked Birmingham fans, they would tell you there are probably only 3. I would say in the greater Birmingham area there are 5, but in the Second City derby, we're talking about Birmingham City, as you got right, now owned by Tom Brady, bizarrely, and Aston Villa are the other ones.
Yes.
And we might talk about them later on.
I was going to
Can you
say the
tell
second
me-
city derby could be Martin Short versus Eugene Levy. That's a comedy deep cut for you. Let's get past it.
And it's gone all. It's so deep. I have
Go-
no
go
idea
watch-
what you're talking about.
Go watch some old SCTV, my friend. Anyway, continue. This is fun.
Can you tell me either of the 2 teams that participate in the Bristol Derby?
Well, if one of them isn't Bristol City, then we got problems.
One of them is Bristol City. Do you know what the other Bristol team is called?
No. I should ask you for the hint because you said you'd give me one team. So then if I just name one team, then I win.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
No, but what
the
is
other
the
team
other
were-
team?
The Bristol Rovers.
Those are different.
Those are different. Bristol City play in red.
Wow.
Bristol
Fair.
Rovers play in this gorgeous quadrant kit. That's fantastic. Also, coincidentally, Bristol Rovers serve the best Balti pie anywhere in the football pyramid.
I want to test that theory.
Excellent. Come
we
on
need to have
over.
a taste test.
And finally,
Wow.
your last derby. Can you tell me either of the teams that play on the Tyne Weir derby? That's like
One of them has
if
to be
you-
one of them has to be Newcastle, right?
very, very good. I'm impressed that you know that.
Yes. Oh, Newcastle.
You are
upon
excellent at
time.
this. Your UK geography is exceptional.
Thank you very much. You flatter me, my friend. However, my knowledge of the other team in these rivalries is failing me. Newcastle. I'm just trying to think of like what other team would be up there, like geographically that would make sense because I don't know this other. Like maybe this is a body of water.
Sure.
What other team is up there? It's not like Forest. What? Who is it?
Had a Netflix documentary.
Sunderland.
Sunderland.
Interesting.
We were starved of a Tyne Weir derby until this year. And obviously Sunderland have been promoted. They played really well this year. And both Tyne Weir derbies have been incredible this year.
So cool.
You did very, very well. And I think there are four principal types of rivalry, and the derby is one of them. And I
Interesting.
think one of the things that makes a derby is number one, it's the one that is most associated with geographical location.
Okay.
For a derby to exist, we are talking about two teams either in the same city or very, very close. Like they share a defined area.
See, can I just say, I thought those terms were almost interchangeable over there.
Right.
I know that there's some sort of geographical element to a derby, but I don't necessarily I figured that was kind of secondary. So interesting that there's four different types in your grand theory, and
People,
only and one of them is this specific type. Like that's interesting to hear. Like
sure.
when I think of that, and I don't know if other Americans think this way or if I'm just being dense, but like I always thought of those two terms as like almost one and the same.
So, frustratingly, a lot of people in the UK get it wrong as well. Uh, as a Brighton fan, I subscribe to the rivalry between Brighton and Crystal Palace, but it is often mistakenly called a derby. Brighton and Crystal Palace are about 70 miles from each other. There is nothing derby about it. A better way of thinking about derbies is if there is a rivalry, derby is binary. It could be either, but it either is a derby or it's not.
Okay.
Whereas my other three categories are different sort of types of rivalry that sit under that. So the one of the examples I've got is also a derby. Celtic and Rangers, definitely a derby. It's the old firm. They both play in Glasgow. And one of the things that I think is so exciting about a derby is fundamentally it only exists because there are one or two or more teams in the same area as your team. And therefore, everyone that's around you that lives in a similar area that doesn't support your team kind of feel like traitors because because you have so much shared experience in that city, and yet you come down on a different side of a really specific pointed binary choice. So
Sure.
my question to you is, do you think that A, derbies exist in America because obviously far more spread out, but you do have a couple of cities that have multiple teams per major sport? And if they do they exist conditional to the divisions that those teams are in? Because obviously
Yeah.
the Yankees and the Mets both play in New York, but they're not in the same. I don't think they're even in the same league. Is that right?
No, they're not. No, the Mets are in the National League and the Yankees are in the American League. But this is a really good question. And honestly, I think my answer feel a little bit. I feel like it feels a little bit more reinforced by now that I live in New York and have for about a year. I've definitely been
Uh-huh.
a little bit surprised at how much I felt like the Yankees Mets divide in the city.
Oh wow, cool.
So I would say yes, they definitely do exist in America. I think more prominently in college sports, as we've talked about
Right.
on the last episode and multiple times throughout this show. Like college sports in America are the closest thing that we have to culturally
Yes.
to football in Europe and the UK. But yeah, so I think they definitely do. Like you think about, and even if the I I want to be specific about this term. Like I want to use that like
Uh-huh.
within the same city, that within the same city definition. So like yeah, I think if you count like Duke, Carolina, they're technically not in the same city slash town, but they're 8 miles apart. Like they're one town over from another. I think that's a derby. I think you think Yankees, Mets, definitely like there is an element to you grew up in New York and you chose one side or the other. In the Yankees case, you chose the like rich, more posh team, more like representing a certain kind of excellence team. And if you're the Mets, you chose the working class underdogs, or your family did years ago.
So glad you brought up class.
Yeah, yeah,
That we will come back to that. That is such an important facet in so many different big rivalries. We will come back. Keep going, King.
for sure. No, but I think it's definitely more limited, and I think some of that is because again, like if it's within college, within the college space where like there's a few schools nearby each other, I think that can definitely be the case. But even then, there's an element, like even the Duke Carolina bit, there's an element toward like to people come into that rivalry from elsewhere in the country. But I suppose you could also make that argument that that's true with any sport and any team.
Sure.
I think where college sports and where like Yankees and Mets specifically, and I would say even less so Giants and Jets on the NFL side, where those come in is like derbies, and where more so than like thinking of the LA Dodgers and the Los Angeles Angels. I think some of that is because a lot of times there was like one team for many years, and then later on another team got pasted into that city.
So that's another really interesting thing, right?
Yeah, and so like that's definitely happened throughout the UK as well. Like Everton or Liverpool was literally born out of the remains of an Everton rent dispute at Anfield. So like I think you could make the case that there is that. It's harder because we don't have as much age, we don't have as much lore built up
Sure.
as maybe some of our UK counterparts do. But I think you definitely see it more in baseball than other sports. So long story short, yes, I think that there are derbies in the US. They're just fewer and farther between.
And when there are derbies in the US, those teams typically don't play each other that often, right? Because they're typically separated by division and league.
Yes, yeah,
Can you
totally.
I don't know this, and we didn't prep this. Can you think of an instance where if it exists, there are two teams in the same sport in the same city that are in the same that do play in the same league or division? Because then obviously the number of times that they play each other is vastly spaced out. If they're only meeting sort of once a season.
The only one that's coming top of mind right now, the only thing that's coming top of mind right now is like honestly LAFC and LA Galaxy, like in MLS.
Sure. Fair.
Like I really don't know if that
Actually, well remembered. Fair play.
exists everywhere. Yeah, like I'd have to think back on
And
that.
I guess New York Red Bulls and New York FC to that extent. But it's interesting that the derbies that we can actually like think of that play each other more regularly because they're in the same conference or league happen to be soccer, where I think derbies and rivalries are particularly fervent and sort of overexposed. There are derbies in the US, and obviously I think it makes it even more exciting when potentially like the Yankees or the Mets meet each other later in the playoffs or even the World Series. The next type of rivalry that I'm really excited to talk about, which I think definitely exists in America, is what I'm calling the Civic Rivalry. This is like a regional. I've used the word hatred, but it's obviously not, that specific. I think in some cases it can be, but it's rooted outside of sport, and it is represented through the teams in that region or that area. The example I want to give is Manchester United and Liverpool. Do you know anything about the regional rivalry between the cities Manchester and Liverpool?
I mean, I know they're in similar areas and like,
Yeah. They're about 30 miles apart, 35 miles
yeah.
apart.
No, but I don't know a ton about this trip. I mean, like, I feel like I think of both of those areas as like pretty working class.
Sure.
Certainly Liverpool. So yeah, no, please tell me more. I'm excited to learn.
Geographically, what is the difference between Liverpool and Manchester?
Manchester's inland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is the route.
Oh, there you go.
Liverpool is the port city in the northeast, and it's at the mouth of the Mersey, whereas Manchester does not sit on the Mersey River and is a larger industrial city further inland at getting about 30 to 40 miles into England's interior. So Manchester relied on Liverpool as a trade post, and therefore their fates were competitive and reluctantly codependent. However, in the 18th century, Liverpool's position as a smaller, albeit still major, trading port was bolstered by the increase of cotton production. And by the late 18th century, Liverpool was the biggest, most important city in the northeast of England. When the American Civil War broke out, Liverpool and Manchester diverged in their response, with Manchester completely embargoing slave-picked cotton and to show support for Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Liverpool did not. In fact, it was said more Confederate flags flew over the port of Liverpool than over Virginia. And in fact, Liverpool built ships for the Confederate Navy. Abraham Lincoln wrote an open letter to the working men of Manchester in 1863 to thank the industrial Mancunians for their sacrifice, because obviously Manchester got very poor.
Yeah.
And the words of that letter are inscribed on a 14-foot tall statue in Lincoln Square
Hell
in
yeah,
Manchester.
Manchester.
It's in this super, like, easy to miss, really low key little square that you can just stumble across, and there's an absolutely massive bronze Abraham Lincoln, and in it is this
So
incredible letter. So there's upon you comes a second quiz.
Okay.
Can you picture in your mind the Manchester United and the Manchester City crests?
Yes. Yes.
Can you think of, and this is tough because I did not prep you for this at all, can you think of the only element that both of those crests share?
Oh, from City and United.
There's one thing that appears on both of them, and only one thing.
This is a good question. I mean, like, I'm picturing the ship on City
Bingo.
and the Red Devil.
He's done it again.
Yes.
Adam Jordan is crushing it tonight. The only thing that is shared on the Manchester City and the Manchester United logo is the three-sailed ship with a spinnaker at the front, and it says stylized. Both of them are quite stylized versions of the same thing. And the last quiz question for you is, where geographically, like physically, where are taxes or duties paid on imported goods? Like if you are moving goods into the northeast of England,
Yeah.
and you are just going to sell them in England from America,
Yeah.
at what point do you pay your taxes?
Like at a customs house, right?
Which would be where?
Inland?
In the port, right?
In the port. Yeah, wait. Yeah.
So if you're trying to sell me something and I'm in Manchester, you have to pay your taxes in Liverpool
In Liverpool.
before it comes to me.
Oh, yes.
Which is a huge point of contention, because if there is literally a rivalry between the cities of Liverpool and Manchester, and Liverpool can control the duties for both imports and exports, Manchester are getting shafted, even though it's the bigger, more industrial city. And to be
Totally.
clear, I don't particularly. I think Manchester and Liverpool are both wicked cities now, and this is just history. But this is the fun. This is the exciting bit, because
so cool.
following the American Civil War, the rivalry between these two cities exploded when Manchester and the merchants of Manchester paid for the Manchester Ship Canal, which goes from the River Mersey, which is very wide and often very shallow and quite hard to navigate, straight to Manchester. It's almost a straight line. And it's this enormous, at the time it was the biggest ship canal, biggest inland ship canal of its kind anywhere in the world. And it means ships never had to stop in Liverpool. Therefore, they didn't have to pay duties, which had completely constricted the economy in Liverpool and let Manchester explode on its own.
Unbelievable.
And from this resentment, this sort of economic metronome passing backwards and forwards between these two cities that were also defined by the Civil War in America, this rivalry between the two cities sort of explodes. And then they both have two of the most incredible, passionately supported, competitively dominant teams in English football history. It's a brilliant story. I can't believe there aren't movies about this.
Truly. I feel like
that
it'd be
is
too complex almost, for a single movie narrative. That is so cool. I don't know that I've ever
amazing.
I don't know that I've heard of a rivalry that has that deep of lore. Genuinely, that is unbelievable, and especially I don't know. I'm sure there's multiple layers to it, but it's crazy. Involving a whole other country's civil war, and
yeah.
Honestly, this is exciting learning for me, because I had heard. When I was a kid growing up, I definitely remember learning that there was some British support for the Confederacy in the Civil War, but I didn't realize that there were I just kind of took that, and I knew Liverpool was kind of the epicenter of that.
Sure.
But I didn't know that there was somebody fighting on the good guys' side. That's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
Respect, Manchester, and
Good old Manchester.
I've never had the chance to hop over there, but I feel like now I have to.
So that's a really good example of what I'm calling. I'm labeling this a civic rivalry.
Yeah, I like this.
Can you
I
think
like this
of
framework.
Can you think of an American version of that, where two cities or two regions are contesting something that isn't necessarily sports related, but manifests in the sports teams between them?
Yeah, I think that's that's tough, because there's again, I kind of go back to the college example. I think
Sure.
there are and again, I'm going to use what I know, but what I grew up with, just for off the top of my head, but I think about the rivalry between the University of North Carolina and obviously you're wearing UNC as well, and NC State University, where
Sure.
one of those schools is a more all-encompassing research university that's the first public university in the nation, and is supposed to be again this flagship research university. And then on the NC State side, you have what started off as, and still persists to this day, an agricultural school.
Wow.
It was
I didn't
very
know that.
much about training the the next generation of farmers and and farming innovation in the state of North Carolina, and from that grew other awesome disciplines there, like meteorology, engineering. The very well known for engineering as well, and like I think out of that kind of there's a certain extra layer to the athletic rivalries where like on the Carolina side, you look at NC State as like a little bit more of the working class side that like, oh, hey, maybe they're not as like tradition. Maybe there's like a reputation of like not being as like traditionally academically elite. But NC State surely like, and I'm obviously saying this as a Carolina fan and like somebody who went to Carolina, like NC State's an awesome school, and what they do and what they've produced are incredible things in their specific disciplines and beyond that as well. So like, that said, like I think some of that kind of permeates. Like you'll hear some Carolina people kind of deride NC State as cow college, and Carolina people, and NC State people will see. We'll see Carolina people up in their ivory tower and think that they're just a bunch of elitist jerks. So like, I think there's a little bit of that, but again, I don't know that you could count that as a civic rivalry, because that's just kind of how the schools grew up, but that's kind of the closest thing I can
is there like, is there any contention between like, and when I was positing the question, I was really thinking about like that cluster of East Coast metropolis, New York, Philly, Baltimore, Washington, where I think a couple of those, like, some of those are a little bit more industrial than others, where, and I think obviously they all contribute like industrially, but when I think of Washington, there's definitely the home of the Smithsonian, there's and such like a significant position in American history. I wouldn't consider Washington and Baltimore as cut from the same cloth, even though they're so close to each other. But here's the thing: like my question is whether or not these rivalries exist. If the Commanders and the Ravens actually don't care about each other, I think that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, no, not really. Yeah,
And it's not a bad thing.
No, I definitely think that's a little fewer and farther between. Though I'm sure there's like some instances of that, and some that I like haven't personally experienced that. There's something similar to that, but that feels like a fairly uniquely UK, or at least uniquely not American.
Sure, and I think for the same reason that the UK has so many ridiculous regional accents, speaks to the fact that a lot of these places, they're just older. There was like a lot of these customs and this sort of regional pride were so much deeply entrenched before we got to the point where we could dig canals and drive ships around our ports to sort of spurn the other city. The first of the last two types of rivalry I've got are probably the most fervent, and I'm going to ask you first if you think there are any rivalries, because this is the one that I think probably doesn't exist in America. If there are any rivalries in the US, or I will extend this to Canada, because I've got one example potentially of one in Canada, where they are based on ideological rivalry, political, religious. I'm not going to, I mean, potentially class. We've already touched on, NC State and UNC for, potential class differences. But obviously in the UK, I'm of course referring to Celtic and Rangers. And I would love to know if you can think of, because again, I don't think one exists that is so clearly ideologically divided.
Yeah, I mean that's I think it's tough again to go outside of class there.
Sure.
But it's hard to think of something that's like truly ideological, and some of that's just because that's how in theory America is supposed to work, where it's supposed to be this great
Right.
melting pot of all sorts of cultures that kind of come together to blend into this one amazing society in theory.
Sure, yeah.
That's what the whole American experiment is supposed to be. But yeah, so I think those like sects didn't form in the time that like our sporting culture was forming. Like certainly,
Right.
like there's like a lot of immigrant groups, especially around the turn of the 20th century. There wasn't, I don't think, individually held enough power, and certainly not enough economic power to kind of hold that, parlay that into something that is like that was significant enough into our like modern to translate into our modern sporting culture.
I think that's pretty incredible. Like, there, America being a melting pot is kind of a fallacy.
Yeah.
Like there are divisions, but the fact that they are not pronounced in such tribal ways, I think's kind of an indicator that there is like a really high degree of success in that, like in those early waves of immigration where it wasn't so entrenched in a way that it was in like even the late 19th century in Scotland when Celtic arrived, and the Celtic Football Club arrived and pronounced itself as like a revenue raiser for Irish Catholics in Glasgow. That was the whole point. They were like, hey, we're just going to raise money for this community. And then because Rangers had a tragic stadium disaster, Rangers had to sell off all their players, and Celtic just got good at the same time.
Wait,
So
so
in
Celtic, so
Glasgow,
like that's why Celtic like has the name and like the green and the clover and like that. Like,
yep,
it literally started because wow, that I didn't realize that there was
it's
such a
incredible.
tight Irish connection. Like obviously other than the
So
imagery.
the Irish immigrants had come over following the Great Hunger, right? The famine lasted for 30 years, killed 1 million people, and displaced, a couple more million, both west and east to the US and to Scotland, where they were met as absolutely second class citizens. There was huge poverty in our biggest cities where Irish immigrants had come to, which is why Celtic, like, why the necessity for Celtic to be formed. The Rangers had already been around for 15 years. And,
Wow.
Glasgow was not as big as it is now. It probably, like, wouldn't necessarily sustain two clubs unless one of them had this mission. But the fact that, like, Rangers fell off for literally about 10 years, and Celtic then developed, it sort of elevated the place of the Irish immigrants, which meant when Rangers came back, it kind of was adopted as like the counter. And this was exacerbated by the arrival of Harland and Wolff, who were shipbuilders in Belfast, and they had to leave Belfast because their like dry port in Belfast was no longer fit for purpose. So they came to Glasgow to build a new one, but
Wow.
Harland and Wolff would not uh, would not hire Catholics, and so they brought with them hundreds of Unionist Protestants, and Rangers then became the symbol for British unionism and therefore conservatism. It's sort of in the face of the Celtic symbol. So this like rivalry was born firstly out of like an absolute good that
Yeah.
Celtic arrived to like support this community, And then like a literal company followed them into Glasgow, maintaining this, we're not going to employ any Catholic rule. That like came from Ulster, which is like the breeding ground of Irish sectarianism,
Yeah.
where it's been most fervent and where there's been most division. And this awful company, I don't know, I obviously don't know their politics now. I'm sure like there's been some reformation, but they came over to Glasgow to kind of pick the fight again.
Yeah.
And then like, Rangers were adopted as their symbol, and there have been like, and then like the old firm Derby is like one of the most dangerous, or certainly historically has been like literally one of the most dangerous to attend. In the 70s and 80s, there was huge like violence on the terraces, and it all came down from, another civil war on a
Yeah.
different country. How could that happen twice?
Yeah. How does that happen? That's yeah. If I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which is more than you'd think.
Yeah, way more. Weird that it happened twice, right? No, but like, I almost there's nothing in America that is that
And I didn't think so.
at
I
all.
googled it, and the only thing I could find that came anywhere close was between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Okay.
And do you reckon, off the top of your head, you could tell me why?
I mean, no. I mean, I know that like Montreal in like today's day and age is like more corporate, but like no, please.
British and French Canada.
Oh, sure, of course,
That's
of course.
That was the
Of
only.
course.
That was the closest we could get.
Yeah, no,
To
totally,
finding an example in the US.
totally,
And like even then,
don't.
it's kind of tongue in cheek.
Yeah, and but like no, yeah, it definitely like it doesn't have that same sense of intensity. But yeah, like don't mess with the pride of the Quebecois. But yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's interesting that yeah, of like you don't think of in North America, you don't think of like Canada as like this breeding ground of like violent hatred, and again, not that it was like that, quite to that extent as the old firm, but interesting that that's kind of the closest analog. I will say it's just a small Easter egg actually, or something that if you go back to the episode that we did on away days, the picture in the background of the thumbnail on your side is actually of the like dividing line between the fans at the old firm.
I knew it. We never discussed it, but I always had a feeling.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
So the last type of rivalry is where I'm actually going to throw it over to you,
Okay.
because this is the competitive rivalry. This is what I'm calling the Flashpoint rivalry. And I think a really good example of this is the Red Sox and the New York Yankees, where the Flashpoint rivalry is where the rivalry starts on the field. Mm-hmm. There's no geography, doesn't have to be a part of it. These can be derbies, but they're not normally. There's no civic rivalry. These cities could be on the other side of the country, and there's no ideological rivalry. These are the ones that I think are most common in the US and maybe the least common in the UK, where we're talking about your guy or your gal did something to my team and we remember that because it sucked or because you cost us a championship.
Yeah.
And I think, could you tell us why the Red Sox and the Yankees hate each other even though they're so far apart?
Yeah, totally. It's very Hatfields and McCoys of us to do that kind of thing. What is it with America and this weird fascination and this weird fascination with old feuds that we can't remember the origin of?
I don't know what Hatfields and McCoys is.
There's this like famous old feud between these like two families called the Hatfields and McCoys. Like I don't know the specifics of it, but
Wait,
it's
for
like
real?
a phrasing. Yeah. Just like this
Oh,
family
wow,
feud
cool.
that like went generations down, and nobody could remember why there was a why the
Cool.
two families hated each other after a few generations. But no, but it there is definitely an origin story with the Yankees Red Sox rivalry, and that's the sale of Babe Ruth from the Red Sox to the Yankees. Which, what's funny there is like it's not like the Yankees did anything wrong there. To the Red Sox to like
Yeah.
slight them for it, they just took their player. They just bought their player, which was like a perfectly normal like player transaction. But Babe Ruth obviously ended up being one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and certainly the greatest of his generation. And yet the that happening in the late 1910s is something that kind
Yeah.
of directly led to the Yankees' first dynasty in the 1920s, and Babe Ruth becoming the person, becoming the player that he was, and that certainly over time led to more and more Yankees success. And at the same time, the Yankees had like 20 titles before the Red Sox had
Wow.
their, I think, fourth or fifth. They won a few like with Babe Ruth and like before,
Sure.
but like they went 80 or 70 years basically before winning another one. In the curse of the Bambino, as they call it. But yeah, so like that one definitely has an origin, and sometimes it's not like a specific inciting incident per se, though like sometimes it is. But a lot of times it's just kind of like repeated battles when the teams just happen
Sure.
to be good at the same time. In the 1970s, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Oakland Raiders, two teams on the opposite sides of the country, were big rivals, and it's just because they were both like at the top of their the top of the league, and had numerous playoff battles. Same with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. That still stretches on to this day. Those two teams have had so many playoff battles over the years, and have been geographically linked by divisions and conferences over the years. But like they're or been linked by that, even though they don't have like a geographical
Yeah, right.
closeness
They're
to them. And
thousands of
again,
miles apart.
yeah, totally. And there were certainly like instances back in back that you'll hear in like the lore of, again, going back to like college sports, of like back when teams had like physical mascots. Like you hear this with like Army Navy, which I think almost exists in a realm outside of the four categories that you've created. But I think maybe there'll be another time to dive into that one. But like you'll hear about like the Army cadets like stealing a goat mascot from the Navy midshipmen back in the day. So like there's that kind of thing that certainly happens. But yeah, most rivalries in the U.S. tend to be just because your teams were both good at the same time.
So, my final question to you, with regards to rivalries, I want to press you personally. You are, as we've said before, a son of Pittsburgh, not literally, but you are a fan of each of the major Pittsburgh teams. Do any or all of those teams have specific rivalries? And could you quickly give us like a reason why?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the Steelers because I was there, because I was talking about them before. Don't really have a rivalry with the Raiders anymore, but like Steelers pretty much just have a rivalry with everybody in their division, and it's just because they've had battles over the years. The Cleveland Browns are probably the biggest, like the biggest historical rival, just because there's like real geographical ties there, like
Sure.
northeastern Ohio and southwestern Pennsylvania are like pretty similar. So there's that. And then I would say like the Bengals and the Ravens are also their rivals. The
Sure.
Ravens definitely being the most the higher profile or highest
Yeah.
profile of those three at this point. The Pirates, it's tough because we just haven't been good enough to like be super hated by anybody. But I would
You just can't piss anyone off.
truly, I would say
Yeah.
probably the Cincinnati Reds again for like quasi geographical reasons. Although Cincinnati
Sure.
is further than Pittsburgh, and then the Penguins are our biggest rival for sure, who we actually just like breaking news live just succumbed to in the in round one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Philadelphia Flyers, like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. That's kind
Sure.
of the biggest like cross state rivalry in and certainly like it within kind of the Pittsburgh Philadelphia
Yeah.
sporting realm.
Do you
And
think
yeah,
do you think teams being in the same state automatically like implies rivalry?
not necessarily because like I would go back to I mean like the Pirates and Phillies aren't really rivals, but
Sure.
again a
Yeah,
lot of that
fine.
is just because like a lot of that's just because of like the relevance of the teams.
Right.
Maybe back in the day they were, but not really. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the case that just because you're in the same state, like and especially when some of those states are so big, like the Bay Area teams, I don't think are necessarily concerning themselves too much with the LA teams out in California. Although you could
Sure. Yeah.
argue that the Los Angeles Rams and the San Francisco 49ers have a little bit of beef there, but I don't think it's an automatic thing.
Okay, fair. And I lied. I've got one more question
Okay.
because I find it interesting that we've talked about the Red Sox and the Yankees when baseball does not appear to be a sport that lends itself to like the manifestations of a rivalry in the way that, contact sports might
Yeah.
be more obviously like contentious. I can imagine if there is like the Maple Leafs and the Canadians, if there is a rivalry there, there's a good opportunity to just knock the living bells out of each other. And same with American football. But like baseball, that must obviously manifest differently. Do you think there are amongst the big sports in the US? Do you think any of those lend themselves to like more heated rivalries?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the contact. I think the contact sports do. Certainly, the sport, and a lot of that is just because you're physically closer to the players. Like, unless
Right.
you're standing on the bases, unless you're like standing on the bases as the fielder, you're not really getting that close to the players in baseball. But
Sure.
like those rivalries, I think steep a little bit longer just because of how many times you play each other and
Sure.
how long the seasons are. But no, I mean basketball. There's definitely plenty of rivalries. I mean, obviously we talk about Duke, Carolina, but like that's because you're like guarding people one on one. Like you're in
Yeah.
people's faces. Like you're very close together, even though it's not like it's a it's not a it's a non-contact sport technically, but you're certainly like
Yeah.
running into each other. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to that. Of like which ones get the most heated.
Sure.
That said, I think you do have one more question that you're gonna have for me because I believe we're at the 2 minute warning,
We sure
and
are.
it is your turn to pose the question to me, my friend.
This is a tough one. I don't know if you got to read this. It was in the show notes about 5 minutes before we started today. And it might be a tricky one to come up with on the top of your head. But with a fully funded 4-year program and your nation's current Olympic coaching team, what Olympic event, winter or summer, do you think you could get closest to competing at an Olympic event in? And I
For
actually think there are a couple of correct answers.
I was going to say there's one correct answer in my head, and
Great.
that is handball. Do you know why I'm going to say that?
Is this where I find out you're incredible at handball anyway? Adam Jordan was just on the Olympic track.
I've been hiding it this whole time. I am a handball god. No, the reason is because the USA is notoriously horrible at handball. There's a reason that you don't see us ever make a splash in it in the Summer Olympics, and that's because you don't see us in the Summer Olympics in handball because we never qualify for it. Because this country, I can definitively say, does not care collectively about handball at this point in time in 2026 and has not historically. Whereas, like, certainly a lot of European countries do very much care about handball, and that's awesome. Handball is a great sport. The reason
it is a good sport.
It's the closest one that I could personally compete in is because, I don't know if you know this, Harry, but in 2028, the United States is hosting the Olympic Games, which, if you didn't know, that means that we automatically get to participate in every single sport.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, actually, both our men's and women's teams have had, like, open tryouts for the Olympic Games. Yeah.
That's
so, like,
wicked.
Really, all you have to... I still could not do this because I'm not good enough of an athlete. But, like, if you're a really good athlete and you excel at other sports and you could pick up handball pretty quickly, like, you got a shot. So, that's the answer.
Such a 10 out of 10 well-considered answer. I wasn't expecting that at all. Well played, Adam Jordan. That's very good.
Mic drop. I can't because it's on a stand.
Yeah,
but what about
really
you, Harry?
Good. All right, so my school of thought is think of a sport that has the highest barrier to entry, like shooting or fencing, where, like, literally to participate, it is a lot of money, which is prohibitive to a lot of people, and also does not require athleticism that at my young, energetic 29-year-old I could still achieve. So my answer is clay pigeon shooting. I'm all right. I'm currently fairly decent. I'm okay at clay pigeon shooting. I've done it a handful of times and I happen to be quite good. But, like, I don't think the number of people that are competing at clay pigeon shooting is anywhere near athletics or even, like, the other sports with a high barrier to entry are things like fencing and anything on horses, I reckon. So, like, just to learn how to ride a horse puts me above 99% of other people in the UK, right?
This is good. It's a numbers game. I like it.
It is absolutely a numbers game. And yet, I don't think I could come anywhere as close to the Team GB Olympic shooting team as you could to Team USA handball.
I don't know.
Also, you're good at sports. Your hand-eye coordination's excellent.
Hand-eye coordination's pretty good, but overall athleticism,
that's your game.
Lacking.
Handball is played on, like, a squash court-sized field, right? It's tiny. We'll be fine.
I certainly would not be putting myself out there to absolutely fall flat on my face, but I appreciate this. This is another good 2-minute warning question. But that said, I think I hear the final whistle. So thanks for watching and listening, everybody. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a follow on TikTok. Leave a comment on leave us a follow on TikTok. Leave us a follow on TikTok, sure, but follow us on Spotify before you do that. How about you just do all of them? Follow us on Instagram as well. We're there. Harry is back in the saddle on the Which American Cities Have the Best Names Sports Teams series, and we're having a great time with that one. But yeah, please leave us a comment and interact with us. We always love to hear from you. Special thanks, as always, to producer Luke for our logo, and we'll see you next time.